essentially the negotiation piece. Let's assume that you have come through a rigorous selection process. You now have in your hand an offer from a university. You're looking at it and you say, what do I do now? What do these things mean? What are the questions I should be asking? And perhaps also you have 2 or 3 of these, wouldn't that be good? That you're sitting there saying, well, how does this one balance out against this other one? And there's this really nasty detailed benefits package about 750 pages thick, and a collective agreement that looks like it needs a good edit. Oh my gosh, we have one of those. How do I make my way through that? What are the questions I should be asking? How do I ask those questions without annoying anybody unduly? And what are some of the important things I should keep in mind as we go through? So this is what I hope to cover in the next few minutes. What to look for in the offer, how do we avoid tension in the negotiation process itself, and how do we seek advice around that? And I'm probably going to concentrate on the first 2 points in particular. I want to make several points along the way about all deals being compromises. At a certain point, you will find there are things you don't like about it, and you'll be forced into that position to weigh things up. The offer between one place versus another. So what I'd like to do then is to turn to the offer itself. We'll come to some of those other things. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on what happens if things go wrong, but sometimes they do, and I want to talk about that. And I hope as well that we will have some time for some questions and answers, at least the questions, even if I can't provide the answers, as the session goes on. So let's assume that you have the offer. What are the important things to be looking for? What should you expect to see? There are some very basic things in an offer that should be there just simply as a result of the collective agreement requirements if you're working at a unionised, intending to work at a unionised university. You should look for things obviously about salary. You should look for reference to the benefits package. There probably won't be much detail about the benefits package in that letter of offer, but you should be referred to it. And indeed, I would hope that in most cases today you would be referred to the website. So you may find a letter of offer today noting a number of web references to the benefits package and to the collective agreement. Most collective agreements, for example, require a copy to be given to everybody who has an offer in hand so that you can review that working document that defines the working conditions of the university. So you should see those sorts of things. Those are all fairly basic. You should also see, obviously, salary. The collective agreement and a website will help you determine whether this is a reasonable thing to be looking at in terms of dollars, and whether this is a competitive salary, and what the trade-offs might be for that, depending on the position and its location and university. You should also expect to see a deadline at the end of the letter that says, we are looking forward to hearing from you by date X. And we may come back to some elements of that in the discussion this morning. Each university does this in a different way, and we'll come to some of that detail in a few minutes' time. So those are the basic things. But you should also expect to see or begin to ask about such things as the teaching assignment. Now, I hope that you will have had that discussion while you were being interviewed, that there was a discussion of what the course load would be, what the teaching model is. Are you expected to teach 2 and 2, 3 and 2, 3 and 3, even for any more than that? But that discussion should take place during the interview process, and the interview committee should be clear about that, and you should feel free to ask them, what is the expected teaching load, bearing in mind that that will vary depending on the type of appointment that you have. So, for example, at Dalhousie we have a rank of the professoriate called instructors, and their load is, their teaching assignment is 3-3, and in some cases, wait for it, 4-4, where there is no research expectation and very little service expectation. These are entirely teaching-only positions. So you'll need to ask those questions and be clear about that depending on the teaching assignment that you have, or the teaching involvement that comes with the position. In a number of science areas, for example, you may be looking at 2-2, 2-1, or even reductions based on research performance of 1-1, something like that. And of course, if you're looking at a Canada Research Chair appointment, there may be even more reductions of those sorts. So being clear about the teaching assignment is really important. That might also include some discussion of release time from teaching that may be temporary. So one of the things I've done in the past and have encouraged people to do is to seek at least a half course or 3-credit course, however you count it, reduction in the first year of a tenure track appointment. And I think that's a good thing to negotiate for. The case to make there is that you have a research program that you need to get off the ground in a new setting. And so the last thing you want is to be doing a great ton of teaching in your first year. So negotiating a course release for research in the first year is a reasonable thing to ask for a tenure track job in particular. For some of the other types of appointment, that's not going to be as well received. You know, if we're hiring you simply because we are doing a sabbatical leave replacement, for example, I need your teaching strength, and I really, bluntly, am not that interested in the wonderful research you're doing. So I'm actually after your skills as a teacher in the classroom. So the type of position will determine what you can ask for there. Similarly, you should ask about what the expectations are for those other components, for research and for service. So clearly, if it's a tenure track position, there are very high research expectations. You should have a discussion about what those are. So if you're on a probationary appointment of some form, you need to be looking 4 to 5 years down the road and have that discussion. Where should I be? What sort of publication record are you looking for? Obviously this varies by department, by discipline, but you need to have that discussion. It also helps to have that discussion with the department chair or the dean, because that gives a very strong signal that you know where you're going and this is important. And so raise that with them. That leads into some of the other things that you might want to see in the offer, and that might include reference. If I click on next, this will help us. This might include reference to startup funds, for example. What's available? What sorts of costs are there in terms of moving your research program forward? Do you need a multi-million-dollar lab that's going to take 5 years to get funded and set up, or would you, or a laptop computer, or just another set of 5x8 note cards? Right? How does this work? Do you need particular types of library access, access to high-speed computing? What are the needs that you have in terms of research? How might that then flow into particular requests for research, including startup funds? Many universities have funds set aside to encourage new researchers. In some cases, those are operating funds. In other cases, they are endowed funds that are designed specifically to give the new employee a real boost in terms of research. And so you should ask about those. It's very difficult to ask about some of these things after the fact, and we'll come back to that point several times in the presentation this morning. Salary and placement on the scale. As you go into the job market, you'll become aware of a variety of different systems at universities. Certainly in the universities with collective agreements, those salary scales are very tightly defined, and you will see them in the collective agreement. In most cases they're available on the web. You should check those out. You should also note that there's sometimes flexibility about placing you on the scale, and sometimes there's not. Some universities have a very tightly developed system for assessing your experience. So the teaching experience that you have, whether you have taught full-time, whether you have taught part-time, whether you have industry experience that's relevant, whether you have other community experience that might be relevant. So at Dalhousie, for example, we have 3 different components that are all factored in and weighted. We assign something, a Y value. Some of your universities may be doing this as well. And then we place people on the scale in relation to the Y value. That's our assessment of where you would be on the scale. Other universities do this much less formally. They will look at your experience and say, okay, it's basically, one-to-one relationship, or this experience with this government department is useful, but we're only going to count that as 50%, and maybe sort of a 2-to-1 relationship, some of those sorts of things. So there is a variety there. And I guess the point I would make here is that it's important to get placed on the scale early. and at the beginning of the process here. It's very difficult to negotiate something later on in terms of that placement. But I do want to note here that placement on the scale, because in most cases in Canada it is constrained by collective agreements, deans and human resource directors often don't have a lot of flexibility. So you need to be realistic about what a starting salary would be. One of the things I do see is people negotiating for salaries that are well above. So I'm really good. Just put me on the associate scale. You know, surely I'm good enough. And you know, if you really want me, you do this. So lots of attempts at leverage. I really would be a Canada Research Chair if there was one available in this particular area of quantum mechanics, but there isn't. So you should place me there after all. And there often is relatively little flexibility to move. The flexibility and the renegotiation of a lot of this can be done, but it's very complicated. I know in our case at Dalhousie, I would have to go back to something called the Association Board Committee, which is a meeting between the University Administration and the Faculty Association. We meet monthly. I would have to make a case to that board because the Faculty Association would have to approve this somewhat one-off thing. Very difficult to do because the focus here is ensuring that we have an equitable, collegially developed salary scale. So bear in mind that you need to have a sense of what is realistic, and obviously that depends on where you are in terms of what sort of job it is, where you're coming from, what your experience is. The offer should also include, as I suggested earlier, a fairly detailed benefits package, or at least reference to that. Most letters of offer will not go into great detail, but you should, as I say, expect to see reference to that material. You may even be given, or have been given at your interview, which is the best practice, that package. So that you've got it in front of you, you can look at some of the details. From what I can see across the country, most universities have pretty reasonable healthcare packages and the like. There is variation. I know where I am now has a poorer vision care plan than the one I came from, for example. But the variations are relatively minor. Part of that benefits package also will involve looking at pension plan. And I know you're going, well, I'm just starting a job, why am I thinking of a pension? But years in pension plan really counts for a lot, particularly if your university or your prospective university has a defined benefits pension plan. And a defined benefits pension plan really is based on service. It's the years of service with the employer. So the earlier you can get into that plan, the better. So it's worth asking those questions, and you should be provided with at least introductory material on the pension plan. The other form of pension plan, of course, is a defined contribution plan. Those plans have some advantages as well. If the stock market is moving in the right direction over time, there are considerable advantages to being in a defined contribution plan. But of course, it's all dependent on market timing. And if you are looking at retiring at age 60, for example, and the market is not in good shape when you want to retire, it's going to make it more difficult to take that course of action. So defined benefits plans have tremendous advantage in terms of benefit for you at the end of your university career.